A lot of people are here to do something, and that energy of like getting it done and however it's going to get done, it's so addictive. That energy is amazing.
Hello, welcome to episode 222 of the Smart Agents Podcast. As always, my name is Michael Walter, and I'll be your host. On today's episode, we are joined by Scott Harris of the Harris Residential Team based in New York City. With more than 2 decades of experience and over $1.5 billion in sales, Scott has crafted a people-first business focused on truly advising clients through purchasing their dream home. Throughout our conversation, Scott shares how he overcame burnout to build his thriving team, tips for communicating with clients, and introduces us to the magnetic method, a unique approach to guiding clients through the emotional and psychological aspects of home buying. But before we get on to the day's featured interview, if you or someone else on your team has an incredible story of real estate success or tips to share with our community, send us a message to feedback@smartagents.com. We're always on the lookout for new guests to inspire our listeners. And lastly, if you enjoy this conversation and want to hear more, be sure to subscribe to the Smart Agents Podcast. We stream on all major podcasting platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and YouTube. All right, let's get on with our conversation with Scott Harris. If you're interested in hearing more from him, be sure to check out his podcast, The Pursuit of Home. I've included links to it, as well as Scott's social channels in the episode description. Really, the way I like to start everything out is if you could just introduce yourself to us a little bit. Tell us where you are and a brief backstory on your real estate journey, how you got into it.
Well, first, Michael, thanks a lot for having me. My name is Scott Harris. I'm a residential real estate agent in New York City, and I live in Manhattan, Big Apple. We do business in Manhattan and in Brooklyn. That's where we focus our business. And I have a team of 10, and we operate under a company called Brown Harris Stevens as the Harris Residential Team. And I started helping people buy and sell real estate and rent real estate too in 2003. So it's been over 21 years, which is bananas. I had a little bit more brown hair when I started. And you know, it's been a real journey during that time.
Yeah. What was it that initially got you interested in the real estate industry and helping people, buy and sell in that market?
Well, I love New York. So I moved from my journey. I was born in New Orleans. I moved to college. I went to Philadelphia, went to Penn in Philadelphia. Then I moved to Boston for 6 years. And then I decided to move to New York. And when I moved to New York, I was not doing real estate. So the way it kind of came together is that my dad was a commercial landlord growing up. So we were always talking about real estate, tenants, all the back end of that at the kitchen table. My mom actually was the marketing director for a New Orleans affiliate of, at the time, Merrill Lynch had a real estate company. So I was hearing it, but I never thought about real estate as a profession until my stepmom. I was sort of at the end of my rope. It was the end of 2002, and I was kind of broke. I borrowed about $6,000 from my mom, who was kind enough to give me a lifeline to stay in New York. And my stepmom said, Scott, you would be a great real estate agent. And I was like, well, it's either this or I'm going back to New Orleans. Like there was no turning back. And as it turns out, I was actually really, really, really good at this real estate thing. It sort of brought together all the things that I either was born with or developed in the 6-7 years out of college and in the working world, but also kind of who I am and what I had developed along the way before then too.
Right. So, breaking into real estate in New York, it's a very competitive market. And, obviously, having some innate skills that you did have. What did you do to break in? What were you looking for in the brokerage that you started, and how did you start growing that business?
It's so funny, Michael. People often will say that word competitive seems to be like the first word. People think New York and, it's so competitive here. And if you step back, yes, there are a lot of people competing for wealthy clients and so on and so forth. But it's also the most liquid real estate market in the whole country, meaning there's just tons and tons of business being done. It's not like you have to capture that much of it to have a good year. Certainly not as like a 28-year-old kid who was trying to break into the business. I either was incredibly dumb or incredibly brilliant to not be thinking about it in those terms. What I was thinking about was, let me see what this is about. Let me just dive right into the training that the first company I worked for was offering. And it was all rentals when I first started. And they had a really good system of how to market, advertise, get clients, and then close deals. And I'd done a lot of sales before, so I wasn't scared of cold calls. I wasn't scared of just getting up and doing the work every day. And so their system really enabled me to like work 7 days a week. The first year I was in real estate, to the frustration of my then girlfriend, I was working all the time. I think I took like 3 days off in the first calendar year. So, it was hard work, but I also loved it. I was running around. I got to meet lots of different people. My first year, in New York, where I was just like, I was drinking from a fire hose. And that year helped me kind of map out New York City, at least Manhattan, in my brain, like what blocks, the way I can file things away. Kind of, I was memorizing things block by block. That's how my brain kind of works. And so it got me so comfortable, and I started to play a game with people like, oh, they give me, I live on the corner of 83rd and 2nd, say, and I'm like, oh, do you live in this building, this building, this building, or this building? So it was like, it became like a cocktail, like a cocktail party game. So everything, it was just really fun. It was hard work, but I was surrounded by really a lot of younger people. This company attracted lots of young people. We were all in it together, and, we were all celebrating each other's successes. And so I never thought about it like competition as much as it was just, hey, if you want to get to the office at 9 a.m, you get your name on the list. And then when walk-ins happen, you're going to be the guy. So there were all these ways that were laid out, like, hey, if you do these few things and you follow our training program, you're likely to be successful. I mean, I think they're assuming like, hey, you're also a decent salesperson. But like, I took every single thing that they gave me and tried to leverage that. And that's how, the first 2 years, that's really how I got my business off the ground.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think, having, peers with you that, help, you guys help push each other and, have a positive attitude towards the work, I think is so important, because, I talked to some agents that wasn't their initial experience. They went in somewhere and it was a slog, and they just felt like they weren't getting the training or, having those, that same peer group to help push them along. And I think that's awesome that you were able to, find somewhere that had that.
Yeah, I've tried to recreate that in the team that I run. It's very much like, can we create a team culture where we're supporting each other? There's healthy competition. When you see your name on the board, or you don't see your name on the board in terms of what you've done in the past week, that hopefully lights a fire. And then you can look and say, well, I'm doing all these things and this other person's complaining and they're not seeing success and they're not doing those things. It's like black and white. Hey, this is why I'm successful right now, or this is why I'm not. And I think that encouraging that kind of atmosphere, I've heard from so many teams that don't do these things. And then we get people reaching out to us saying, hey, I'd love to talk to you about joining your team, because they sort of hear and they see it's like very much a positive atmosphere.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely want to touch on, building your team and, everything that you have going on with that. But I also was reading, in your biography, eventually having some burnout in the, 2014, 2013 area. Tell me about kind of what led up to that and then what changed for you.
Well, so what I would say that the first few years I was on my own. So I was at a company called City Habitats, which ended up being sold to the same company that owns Corcoran, which is a Barbara Corcoran had sold her company. So these were like a publicly held company called Realogy bought Corcoran and then City Habitats. So I was part of that ecosystem for a number of years. About 4 years in, I had the opportunity. I moved to my current company actually to join a team. And so I was part of this team that moved over to Brown Harris Stevens to work on a new development. And I was just chugging away doing really on my own. And then in 2011, I had my daughter, we had our second daughter on the way, and I was working as much as a person can work. And I realized if I don't do something about this, I'm going to burn out. And then, and I'm never going to see my kids. And maybe my wife isn't going to like me very much either, but that's another thing. We're together and I love her very much. She's amazing. And then, so I hired an assistant. So that was the first kind of, all right, let me try to spread some of this work out. And that did pretty well for a while. It freed me up to do more business development. And then in the process of that, I would say about 2010, I had left the team that I was on. I realized I needed to build something for myself. Fast forward to 2014, I had my best year ever. It was totally amazing. And I was working again. I was back to working all the time because I had sort of filled in the holes with, I'd hired some people. I actually also had hired a couple people to join a team, although I didn't really know how to do that either. I was kind of figuring it out as I went. And I'd also burned out assistants because I wouldn't let that. The way I describe it, it was like the Scott show. I was very much like an operator in my business, and I wasn't delegating properly. And by the time I got to 2014, I should have been super excited. I'd sold $70+ million of real estate, which is a lot for a real estate agent, and yet I'd never been less happy. And I think the reason why is because I wasn't willing to empower other people, and I wasn't building the business with a solid foundation. And so I actually said, maybe this just doesn't work. Maybe this is not a business for me. What I should have said is, Scott, you need to figure out how to focus on the things you're really good at and bring in more people to do everything else. And so the last 10 years has been kind of break it down into pieces, really empower people to take on the work, create systems, and then around all of that, really create communication so that your clients understand what you're doing and why you're doing it and how it's going to help them. And once that got going, I was able to attract more people. They were having more fun. My assistant wasn't getting burned out and quitting every year. My operations people started to really see this as a part of something bigger. And it was really, it started to become a lot more fun. Not to say we haven't had lots of bumps in the road in the last 10 years, but there was a real shift at that time.
Right. Was there anything in particular, or maybe different people or mentors that you reached out to kind of help shift your mindset on that, from being that, being the Scott show, to different methods and different ways to bring in people and empower them?
Well, let me just say, I still get caught up in, I got to do this myself. So that
right.
doesn't, that energy is still lurking there. Right. Hold my beer. Let me go do this thing. Right. And so I have to always watch for that, because I do have amazing people that work for me that do most of the things in my business a lot better than I do. And so one of the shifts, I think, really was to start to say, I can't do this myself, on every level. So I started interviewing, and I worked with a series of business coaches. If you're young in your real estate career, you may say, well, I don't have enough money to do this and this and this. But I think the insight is you can do a group type of coaching situation that costs a lot less money. You can read books. Lord knows I've read plenty of books to try to figure these things out. But I worked with some coaching. I did some self-help stuff to kind of realize some of the ideas and the paradigms and some of the things that they worked until they didn't work. Work hard, super hard works until it doesn't work. You have to start working smart at some point. You say yes until your plate is so full, you have to start saying no. I started working with a coach that I'm still with in 2018. And that sort of completely pivoted things for me. And he's been an incredible partner, call me out of my stuff. I think that's been the biggest pivot. And, I don't think I've talked about this a lot. And, that I actually stopped drinking in 2019, which it was just a habitual problem. Yeah. And I realized it wasn't helping, wasn't serving me anymore. Yeah. And so I just said, you know what, I'm going to cut that out. And I'm a better father. I'm a better operator. I have more energy, all these things. It was just something and I talked to lots of people who wouldn't have described their drinking as a problem necessarily, but on the spectrum of it, it was probably, on the left side, but it still was something that wasn't working. So I think that was also a huge change that opened up a lot of energy for me and allowed me to focus all day, all night on this business and the clients that I love, frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally, I relate to that. I actually, quit drinking at the beginning of this past year, and it wasn't, like you said, on the spectrum of, things. I was definitely not, it was not something that was, um, a big hindrance to me, but I did realize quickly that once I stopped drinking, how much more energy I had and just how much more, ready I was to go at the beginning of every day. And I think it's great to, really, I think you do have to work on yourself before the business and everything else can really, really take off.
Yeah. The other thing, and good for you. I'm glad that we both had that insight. Um, I run in the morning, so I have like a good morning practice, and it's not every day, but I've run marathons and that kind of stuff. But what I realized is I needed more like all the time practice, and I dipped my toe in the water of like meditation about that time, maybe even a little before, and it started with like 5 minutes, and over the years I've maintained that practice, and that's been a huge help because in real estate I'm always meeting my clients at their most stressed. That's just inherent. That's just part of the interaction. You can't make your clients less stressed out. That's how they're going to be, right? And so being able to just always be able to tap into that calm place has been a huge help also, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Kind of shifting over to working with your clients and interacting, especially with these buyers. These are, New York City. You're moving to the Big Apple. I mean, that's a place of dreams for a lot of these folks. Tell me about the uniqueness of working with buyers in a market like that.
The amazing thing about these clients is that I meet people doing all different manner of things. New York, people, it's well known for Wall Street, but in the time since I started, Manhattan and New York City has really become less dependent on Wall Street as the source of all of its income. So there's Wall Street, there's finance, there's attorney, there are legal services, there's high tech. And so over the years, I've met people doing so many different things, and they're very intentional. They've come to New York to do something. They're not accidentally in New York.
Right.
Like, I mean, maybe you grew up here, but my kids who were born and raised here, like they love it too. But a lot of people are here to do something, and that energy of like getting it done and however it's going to get done, it's so addictive. That energy is amazing. And you want to be around those people because they're up to something and they're passionate. So that's the kind of person. At the same time, and I don't know if agents around the country get this, but when I'm introduced to a buyer or a seller, almost always they're like, "Hey, Scott, I want you to meet my friend so-and-so. I really like you. You're not a jerk." That's right. Also part of it.
Right.
You're not like all those other agents, which is something I started to hear more and more. I'm like, oh, I think I'm doing something that feels more me. But Scott, I want you to meet so-and-so. And I just want to let you know they're a little bit crazy. That's like the phrase that I get all the time. So if I had a dollar for every time somebody introduced me with that like caveat, I'd have a pretty awesome pile of money also. But people are super, super intense. They can be. There are a lot of type A people, and I relate completely to them. And that energy doesn't scare me off. In fact, I'm like, oh, tell me more. I want to learn all about you and why you're so passionate about that. And so I would say like, that's the kind of person. I mean, there are plenty of people that are more shy, that are more reserved, super brilliant hedge fund guys who are like, you can barely hear them talk.
Right.
They're so intense and so smart. So we get all kinds, but I think a lot of people here are really going out and, they're making it happen.
Yeah. So, talk to me about how you and your team, help get them through that process of, maybe they are moving across the country and, for a job or for something. And, with today's day and age, there's so much virtual stuff and what you can do without even them having it come. So what are you doing to help them find that dream property?
The first thing, someone told me something a few years ago, a guy who is a wealth manager, and he said it in such a perfect way. I said, what's the secret to your success? And he said, the secret is to give the same information to my clients again and again and again with grace and patience and love. I was like, oh, let me think about that. What happens is you meet people, and the way we think about helping them find their dream home, it's about creating the conditions for them to get very comfortable. They're busy. This is like a distraction from whatever they're up to. They need to both trust us, but also get the sense that we're going to take care of as much as we can take care of. Every single thing that we can take care of. Maybe there's a little bit of homework that they have to do, but what we want to do is create the conditions so that the work they have to do is just to get comfortable and open up and communicate about how they react. And so they often will be like, they won't be responsive, and we have to reach out to them again and again. Or they say, what was that thing again? And what was that thing? And like, you have to be so patient and understand like where they're coming from is they're used to people working for them. They're used to it. I asked this guy, the same guy who gave me this wisdom, I said, how many of your clients are like, would be considered ADHD? He's like, all of them.
Right.
They're distracted. And even if they're not diagnosed with ADHD, it's like, they're just moving at 1,000 miles an hour. And so you just have to assume that you're going to have to educate and say the same thing again, and just be super patient. You have to be so patient. You can't get frustrated or complain that they're not listening. Our job is just to give that information again until they finally start to absorb it. So there's a huge educational component that helps get them confident, and then just to be super patient so that they can work through their own. Because at first, I like to describe it, and I do in the book that's coming out next year, I call it opposite mode. There's a time when it's not that they know what they like yet. They may have a checklist. They may have a first draft of what this vision, this dream home looks like, but they have to go through some stages. And one of them is to tell me, I don't like this about it. I don't like this. I don't like this. And they spend all this time focusing on the things they don't like. And then at some point, it's like they finally stop looking at the things they don't like, and they flip and they start focusing on the things they would love. And you have to hold that space for long enough until they finally get out of that opposite mode. And for some people, it takes longer, and some people it takes less. Sometimes it's because they're a couple and one person is not ready yet, and they have to catch up to the person who is. And so a lot of it is just being like, just slowly, methodically pushing that ball down the field until everybody's like, oh, this is what we want. And then also reflecting back on them. Hey, you seem to react a lot, really positively to this space, and try to slowly educate them on what they like themselves. Sometimes they don't realize it. You keep saying you want this, but every time we go into this space, you love it. So what is that?
Right. And I think that, really picking up on people's, not only their verbal cues, but those nonverbal cues, and just kind of tapping into the energy that somebody's putting off when they are, viewing a home. What are some of the things that you've done to really kind of be able to tap into what, to see when somebody's starting to, okay, this is where I'm shifting and where I'm starting to like things?
I describe what we do, and we brand this as the magnetic method. So the way we think about it, it's, you have to kind of strip away all the things that aren't your house to get to the house, right? And part of that is at first, yes, you got to help them create a first draft, and then kind of wade through that messy middle until they get to the vision that's a lot clearer. And in that messy middle, the way I describe it, I'm willing to ask like provocative questions, and it looks like tough love in some respects. And it's like holding on and like asking a question that's a little uncomfortable, having an uncomfortable conversation that kind of cuts through all the BS, that gets to the heart of it, and they hear it back. So the way we get to it is by being willing to tell people what they don't want to hear sometimes. And if you're, if you work at a restaurant, I worked at a restaurant, I think it's like the best training for knowing, hey, I don't want to do that for the rest of my life. You can either be an order taker at a restaurant, or you can suggest, hey, this is great and this is great. And you become what I call, and I tell my team, an advisor. You have to have enough confidence in yourself and what you know in real estate to like advise, recommend. And so a lot of this comes from, you're doing enough work whether you're early in your career or ongoing, to really know the market, to really know how these deals come together, so that when push comes to shove, you hear somebody and you push back. They're not they might be the captain of, the captain of the universe, about whatever they're expert at, but they're coming to you, please help me do this. And so you have to have enough confidence to say, why are you coming back with that opinion? Why do you think the market is this? Why do you think the seller is going to accept this low offer? Like, actually have the uncomfortable conversations. And then eventually they start to realize, wait a minute, all I need to know is what I love in this property. And then, and then Scott and his team or whoever is going to help negotiate on my behalf, they have to know you care. So like at every step of the way, you better care about your clients, because that one misstep where it becomes about the commission and you forget that this is about your client, you will lose, because they'll know it. And then you'll lose their trust.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really like, the idea of being that advisor and really helping these people. Because like you said, you're dealing with people that they are the hedge fund managers and they are the super type A personalities that, in their world, they are the expert. But if you're able to help walk them through a very stressful time in their life, and provide them with all the insight that helps get them to the finish line, and you've done it in a way that educates them and helps kind of bring that stress level down, I have to imagine that helps with the referrals and the business down the line as well.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that you have to constantly remind people, this is your decision. I want to give you all the tools so that you can make the most informed decision possible. I'm on your side, and there are plenty of times when I say, this is not the property for you. Like, you may say you want to buy it. You may be like saying, oh yes, we're ready to move ahead. But then every action says the opposite. You're like, I don't think you're ready. I don't either think you're ready. I think you're too, and I have to have enough discernment to know, like, when are you just scared? Because that happens. Or when are you really signaling, the husband wants it and the wife doesn't. The wife wants it, whoever it is, somebody doesn't want it and they're acting out. And so you have to allow for those conversations to happen. But yeah, it's all about making sure they know this is your decision. I'm here to support that. I'm here to make sure that everything you need to know to make the best decision is available, but it's yours at the end.
Talking about that whole conversation of, maybe this isn't the best thing for you, or, advising somebody against a particular step. I have to imagine that's something that is kind of learned and honed over time, having to, be able to not just be the yes man and say, yes, we're going to do everything you want. What was that, what's that process like for you? And then how do you train and, work with agents, to really be able to tell somebody, maybe this isn't the best time?
Well, I would start by saying that when you have a buyer who wants to spend $3 or $4 million and you're looking at a huge commission, and it can be very scary or very tempting, I guess, more to the point, to say, yes, yeah, let's just do it. This is great. This is awesome. And so the things I try to show my team now is to say, look, we're going to build your pipeline. This is not, it's this or something greater. That, that saying no to this and building trust with your client is worth much more than one deal. It's worth the infinite number of pieces of business that they're going to refer to you because they know you care first. And if it's not this deal in this moment, it could be so much more. Think bigger, think bigger, think bigger. And that's hard to say when you're trying to pay rent. I get it. I've been there. I had to sell when I was 24. I didn't know where my rent was going to come from. I had to sell a bunch of sound equipment. I was in a band and I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. Like, I got to cash out of this stuff. I mean, I know exactly what that feels like. It's scary as can be. So how did I transition out of feeling that? I think it's really coming from a place of, I'm not going to be homeless. I'm not going to be on the street. I've got plenty of, money coming in from lots of deals. And this deal I don't know if there's the former CEO of Keller Williams is this wonderful guy. His name will come to me in a second. I was on the phone with him. He wrote a book, and we were just talking through this in a meeting. And he said that deal wasn't yours anyway. Until they signed the deal, it's not yours anyway. Why are you thinking this is your deal to lose? It's not your deal. And I think those kinds of like little pieces of wisdom picked up over time go, do the work little by little to build your confidence that it's more important to do what's right for the client than to do what's right for you. And ultimately, long term, those two are the same anyway. But in that moment, it's just to like be aware of when you're starting to drift into that place where you're not giving the best advice possible because it's better for you. And I will say one more thing, Michael. I've been in listing presentations with sellers, and I can tell you how many times, every time I've told them what I wanted to hear, I've embedded into that relationship the wrong energy. And then as things go, and things inevitably go wrong, and they don't trust you, and the deal falls apart in some way or another. You lose the listing, it doesn't sell, it always falls apart. And so you do that enough times, and you're like, okay, like in that, when you have that moment, that fork in the road, when you can tell them what they want to hear or not, like, you know what? Like, I'm not going to recommend that. I don't know where you're getting that price. I mean, and I'll say like, it's ultimately your price, but I got to recommend what I got to recommend. And if I lose some business, I lose some business, but you know what? Like most of the time they appreciate what you have to say, and you did the best that you could for your client.
Yeah.
And that's going to pay off in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned it earlier. Talk to me a little bit about your book that you have coming out and what that's all about.
Well, a few years ago, I was in Las Vegas. My company flew me out there to speak at a conference of something called Leading RE, which is like all privately held companies around the country gather in Vegas or other places. And I was up at like 3 a.m, jet lagged. And I had been doing a lot of writing and thinking about like, how do we do what we do? What makes us different and so on. And I was listening to this guy, Joseph Campbell, and who was a thinker. If you've ever heard of, he was a philosopher and just created what's called the hero's journey. Mm-hmm. This is every Disney movie and Star Wars, that story of the reluctant hero who goes through that process. It's Moana, it's Frozen, it's every Disney movie. And I realized that the home buying experience maps right onto that. Mm-hmm. And it inspired this book, which I've called The Pursuit of Home. And it really was like, I needed to get this out because I realized that home buyers and sellers too, but home buyers go through this emotional, psychological journey, which I think has a lot of growth within it. If they choose to embrace that, they go through this and nobody talks about it. There are no books that talk about what is the emotional, spiritual experience that buyers go through to get to the home that they would love. And it's not in social media. It's not really talked. There might be a tear at the end of a real estate show, but they don't really dive into the mess that any agent listening to this knows. When we say we have to be psychologists, it's not, it's true.
Right.
And so there needed to be a book about this experience. How can a buyer have a better experience? What are the roadblocks? What are the landmines that could sabotage your search? How do you pick an agent that's going to be on board for you? What are the skills that your agent should possess? I mean, it's also helpful to agents to like learn about what buyers go through to get there. And so, it ultimately, I wrote it and I started to shop it and got a literary agent and ultimately found a publisher who got along, who understood this. But it took a long time to really articulate this and put it into a form that really, I think, gives buyers things to do all along the way so that they feel empowered and they feel educated and confident to buy a home that they love.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we were talking about earlier, before we started recording, this book is it's not just for the home buyers, but fellow agents being able to see, read about the psychology, and the different, steps that these home buyers go through. I think it's really important, especially for newer agents, to be able to get some of that wisdom as well.
Right. And buyers need to know, what is their communication style? They need for themselves. What do I need from my agent so that I feel comfortable? Because some people are looking to be inspired, and some people, and most people, want a lot more data. Some people are focused on what the home can be, and some people are more focused on, is this right for my kids? And so if you don't take the time as an agent or as a buyer to know what that style is, the whole thing can be, you could be the best agent in the world, and if you're talking right past the buyer, they don't think you care.
Yeah. What, for that, to figure out what that, the communication style is, or what they are, what this particular client really gravitates to, how do you start that initial conversation to figure out, okay, this is a really data-driven person, or this is a person that is strictly a lifestyle and what this, home can do for my family?
Well, don't forget, often there are two people in that. So, and often opposites attract. So it's most of the time when you have to kind of hold space for both, right? But there's an intake meeting. So many agents rush into, let's go see property. Let's rush in and go do it. I found that the best way to encourage to start things off on the right foot is to sit down in person. Now, it could be Zoom, it could be a phone call. It's all about, but to really take the time, that initial 30 minutes, to say, what are you about? It's not even about the property at first. What are you about? And in talking and getting a sense of how they describe their life and what they're up to, that alone, you start to get a sense of things. If it's a couple, how do they interact with each other? Before you even get into real estate, I think before the temperature goes up, that's a great way to get to know people. And then if from there, then I like to think there's a proper order to learning about somebody's dream house. And it's not, how much can you afford?
Right.
That's not how it starts.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is if you start with the scary stuff,
mm-hmm.
for them, are you financing? How much do you have to put down? People shut down. So instead, start with the exciting stuff. What are they dreaming of? What about why? Tell me what you want the house to look like. Do you entertain? Just getting a sense of how they live. And then, yes, are you paying cash? Are you financing? And get a sense of that. But if you do it in the right order, they're excited. And then, yes, there's some homework you have to do. There's some forms you have to sign and so on. But if you do it in the right order, they're still excited about it. And then you're I'm going to take care of all the nonsense for you. I'm going to try to, we're going to focus on the work you can do today, which is do your work, do your job. Don't turn buying a home into a full-time job, although most people do.
Right.
And then I'll focus on the stuff that we're good at. And, we're your partner in this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we wrap up, where can people, follow you to keep up with when the book comes out, and where they can find it when the time comes?
Well, of course, we'll be shouting down, telling everybody everywhere about the book when it comes out in October next year. But I'm most active on LinkedIn. So if you look up Scott Harris, you'll see me. And I write a lot about the deals that we're putting together, all the clients that I'm meeting. I don't kiss and tell, but there's good stories there. A lot of the lessons we learn about running a team. And my feeling is, if you can do it in New York, you can do it anywhere. And so the experience here is it's like an expanded version of how buyers go a little nuts everywhere in the country. And I'm on Instagram at Scotty Harris, IE. And yeah, those are the two places I think you can spend a lot of time. We have a podcast, which is an add-on to The Pursuit of Home, the book that's coming out, which is also called The Pursuit of Home. So if people want to know, what are real people buying real estate? What does that look like? That's our focus, because those are the real issues that it's not, glossy. It's unfiltered, and agents are on there talking about. If you're an agent out there and you have great stories and you're from somewhere outside of New York, please be in touch. I'd love to talk to you and get your stories, and maybe get your clients on to talk about what they've gone through to buy a home.
Awesome. Yeah, that'd be great. So I do appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today.
Thanks a lot for having me, Michael. Appreciate it.
I want to thank Scott for joining us today, and really appreciate him for sharing his approach for working with clients in such a unique market like New York City. Remember to check out the episode description for links to Scott's podcast, The Pursuit of Home, and his social media channels. So once again, if you think you or someone else on your team has an incredible story or real estate tips to share with our community, send us a message to feedback@smartagents.com. Well, that wraps things up for this episode, but remember, follow the show wherever you listen to podcasts, and make sure to subscribe to the Smart Agents YouTube channel. Again, I'm Michael Walter, and we'll see you on the next episode.